All right, welcome guys. So in this session, let's take a look at the React object, okay? We already know that React is a library that we use to create single-page applications. So how does this work? So let's take a look at it. But before you continue with this session, you need to have Node installed. You need to have Visual Studio Code installed, okay? At least these two things, or in case you have any other IDE, no problem. But I recommend for this course, you must have Node installed. You must have Visual Studio Code installed, okay? And in case you don't know how to install Node, it's just very simple. Go and Google it, all right? But I'm not going to teach it in this session, okay? Because in our JavaScript class, we have already shown you how to install Node and even how to install Visual Studio Code. So I'm not going to do that here. But in case you don't know how to do it, you can also reach out to us, okay? But I assume you already have Node and Visual Studio Code running on your laptop or on your computer. All right, so before we go into the React object, let us see a simple setup of a React application, okay? So I'm going to open, I have this page already opened here. It's a simple HTML page, okay? And if you watch, I have this div here with the ID of root. Now remember that React only starts with a single page and that's all. So every other thing we now put in that page will not be mostly components, just not everything will be component. So at a point in time in your HTML page, you're going to have a place where you will start your application. Basically, where would all these components where would they be? Okay, where are you going to put them? So you will start with something like this, okay, div like this or main, all right, but I'm not going to be talking about semantics, okay, semantic HTML. But right now what we are doing here is that we are starting with a div. It can be section, it can be main, okay, it's up to you, okay, but I'm not going to talk about that here. So here we are saying ID, and the ID of this, we are saying div, and the ID of this div is root. Now when you do this, okay, you need to get the React, you need to get the necessary scripts that you need. So first of all, you will need the React, okay, library. This is where you can get it. You can get it from here, all right? You can get it. This is the React. The first script we have here is the React library. So if I copy this and go to my browser, all right, when we come here, if I paste this here now, okay, and hit enter. So this is the React library. So that our script is pointing to this place. Another thing you can do is, if you don't want to use the CDN, if you want to have it locally, what you can do is, once you have copied, okay, I would, okay, just look at the URL that I'm using here. Just make sure that you're in this URL, umpkg.com//react at 18.3.1 /umd/react.development.js. So just make sure that you're in this URL. So what you can do is that you can select everything and copy it. I have selected everything and I have copied it. So let me go back to my file. So what I will now do here is that I can come and create a file here. I will call it React.js. I already have it here. So, okay, look at what I'm going to do. I'm going to delete everything so that I start afresh. Okay, I'll delete everything so that I'll start afresh. Okay, so now I only have, I have even the Babel. I will also delete it. Let's start afresh. All right. So the only thing I have is the HTML page. Okay. So if I want, I can actually get this React from, I can actually point it to a CDN, or I can actually just get it and have it locally. Okay. So in case I do not have network, I don't need to connect to the internet. I can just run it locally. So I can just come in here and then create a file. I'll call it react.js. And what I have copied from there, I'll paste it here. So this is the React library. I have it locally now, okay? Another thing I will do is that I will need to go and copy, I will need to go and get the React DOM. So this is the CDN URL. I'll go to my browser. I'll copy it, go to my browser. I will paste it here. Okay, hit enter. Okay, so this is the URL, umpkg.com/React DOM at 18.31 / just take a look at it, and then what you do is just copy it. Okay, copy it, go to your Visual Studio Code, create another file, call it React DOM.js, then paste it. So right now we have the file locally. Save it. We will need to get Babel, okay? And all these files, we are going to discuss them in details, show you exactly what they do. Okay, so we need to get Babel. So I would go to the HTML page again, and I will copy the CDN, the URL for Babel. Okay. Then I would paste it. All right, hit enter. And this is that for the Babel. So I'm going to select everything and copy it, go to my Visual Studio Code. In case you find anything difficult, please reach out to us. I'll call it babel.js. Okay, then I'll paste my Babel here. All right, so I have everything here. So I have two options. So in my HTML page, okay, I can actually run this thing from here using the CDN. So let's try it out. Okay. Now, but look at what I'm doing here. I'm getting all the scripts. Okay. First of all, you have to use source. Okay. Then copy the URL, that URL that I have pasted there. That is where you are going to point this thing to. Okay. Make sure, okay. I can zoom this so that you would actually see it. Now, see my script here. All right. So this is the script. So you can see it very well. Then just copy these URLs. Okay. You can actually put it this way, or you can do it the other way. Take these URLs, go and paste it in your browser, copy the code that comes out, and put it in a separate file like babel.js, react.js, and react.js. So now let's try the first one. So let me zoom out. Okay. All right. Okay. Okay. So now look at what we have here. Okay. So now, after you have these scripts here, after you have these three scripts here, the next thing you need to do is to create your React app. You also have to put it in a script like this. All right. So inside this script, make sure you have this type. Don't worry, we are going to explain this, what we mean by this later on. Okay. When we start talking about Babel, we're going to explain it. But here, let us focus on this. Okay. I have a function. I have a function. Um, I have a function component here. Okay. Don't bother about how to write a function component. Don't worry. We're going to teach you that later on. But I just wanted to show you how React works. So this is a functional component. Okay. So I am saying here, I'm returning this thing that looks like HTML, but this is actually called JSS. But don't worry about it. We'll talk about it later on. Okay. Don't worry about this whole code. Okay. Now, after I have created this functional component, okay, the next thing I have inside this my script is React DOM.create root. And inside of it, I'm saying get document dot. Okay, I can just take this guy out. Okay, so I'll take it out and say const, and I will call it root root DOM. Okay, so this is this is now what this will get. This document will get element by ID will get this particular div here. Do you understand? That is what it's going to get. It will get this particular div. So now we are now telling React DOM. Don't worry, we'll still talk about React DOM. Okay, but in this session we are focusing on the React. We are focusing on the React object. So I will now say React DOM.create root. Then create root for me. I'll give it the root DOM. Okay, then after that, I'm now saying root.react app. Okay, so when I save this file now, just make sure you have all these things in check. have your HTML page like this. Make sure you have a div with ID equals to root. You can change the name of this ID, but make sure you also it also matches here, because that's what we are getting from here. Okay, so make sure you have all this, the right URL that pointing to the CDN. Okay, make sure you have your script like this, starting with text slash Babel, and make sure you have your functional component like this. Okay, so when we do this thing, I save it and I'll click on go to live. But in case you don't have this live server, okay, sorry, let me close this. Let me go back to the Visual Studio Code. Okay, in case you don't have live server, I just use live server to open it now. In case you don't have live server, what you will do is this: go to extension, click on extension, and click on live server. All right. So live server here, what you do is click on the install. My own, I already have it installed. So this is an extension. So click on install. Do you have, if you have not installed it, you see it install here. So click on install. But for me, I have installed it, and that is why I will have, let me close this one. Okay, so if you have it installed, you will see go live here. So click on go live, it will run this to your web page. All right, and this is what we have. So this is a React application now. Okay, so if I click on this, it will say hello React. Okay, so this is a very simple React application, but this is how we were able to set it up. We have several ways to set this whole thing up. I'm just going to show you each and every one of them. Okay, so now here we are pointing, we are getting our React DOM and the Babel from CDN. But what if we don't want to get it from CDN? What do we do? So I'm going to comment this out. I'll comment it out, and I will now say React DOM and Babel from local. Okay, so I'm going to comment it out. So in here, I'll put in my script. So my first script will be React, and the source of my script would be React JS. Okay, then the second script would be React DOM. Oops. The second script will be React. Oh, the second script will be React DOM, and my source would be React DOM. Then the third one is going to be Babel. Okay, don't worry. We are still going to talk about React DOM in the next session. The other session, we'll talk about Babel, and we are going to explain every single thing that we have here. You're going to understand every single thing we are doing here at the end of this whole chapter. Okay, so now I am not trying to get it online. I have it locally, because remember, I took this URL to the browser, typed it in, hit enter, and got the actual files. These are the actual files here. So I got the actual files here. All right, I got the actual files here. So, okay, so I got the actual files here. So now that is where I'm now loading them. I'm loading them. Okay, now I'm still going to leave the whole thing we have here. Don't, but we'll keep explaining them. Okay, so but right now we are able to have the libraries. We have the React library, we have the React DOM library, we have the Babel library. So I save, and if I go back to our browser, everything works the same. But this time around, I'm no longer using CDN. Okay, I'm no longer even if I'm not connected to the internet, this will still work. I would have turned off my internet, but right now I'm using it, so I wouldn't. Okay, so you can do it locally here, or you can do it from CDN. Okay, so that is it. So this is simple enough to start a React application. All right, yeah, it's a very simple React application. This is simple enough. So now let's start talking about the React object. Okay, so let's start talking about the React object. So in order to do this, let me change this thing to, I'm going to change this component to a class component. Don't bother if you don't understand what I'm going to do here. So I'm going to say class, and I will do class. I'll call it app component. Don't bother about what I'm doing. I'm going to explain later on. So I will say extends, just follow me. Okay, I will say extends React dot component. Okay, so we have started using the React object. I will say React dot component. Okay, I'm extending it. So this is a class that I'm writing. So a React component will always have the render method. So in this render method, I'm not going to say return React dot create element. Okay. Oh, my return is bad. I didn't get the spelling correctly. So this React create element, first of all, will take in um, what element do I want to create? Let me just create a simple H1 element. And what will be the attributes? Let's say I would have, don't worry, I'm going to explain all these things. When we start creating React, I'm going to explain all these things. So I'll say class name, and the class name is going to be, what do I call it? I'll have a class name, and I'll just say React, okay? It doesn't matter. I'm not using it right now. Then what will be the child? I will just say hello React. I'll just say hello React. I don't want, I'm going to explain all these things. But right now, I can just comment this one out because we are no longer using it. Let me comment it out. We are no longer using it. So, okay. So now, instead of rendering this app, it's no longer available. So I'm going to render the app component. Okay. So when I run this now, let's go back to our browser and see if we got any error. You see, we got it working. All right. So now let's go and see what we have done. So basically, look at what we are doing. We are using the React object here. See this React object. Okay. That we used it here. We used it here. So, but exactly what is it? What is this React object? This is what I'm going to do. Before I run this thing, I'm going to say console.log. Okay, I'm going to log this React object. This React object is coming from this library. The React object is coming from this library. If I go inside this library, um, okay, let's go to the top and see if it's where they are exporting it. Pam, 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 pam. Okay. I know at a point they will be exporting this React object, but yeah, this might be confusing, but don't bother. I just want to show you something. So let me search. Um, I've forgotten how to search inside a file. I've forgotten how to, is it peak? Ah, I've forgotten how to search inside a file. Okay, so don't worry. Let me go here and search. So I will search for React. Aha. I just want only React. I'll search for only React. Okay, okay, we don't have any match here. Uh-huh. Okay. Okay. Let me not waste your time. There are a lot of code. Yes, I'm trying to find this React object where it might be exported. I'm trying to see where it might be exported, but I don't want to waste your time. I have to leave it. Okay, so don't bother. I have to leave it. Okay. Okay, so let's go back to our HTML. So now I want to console.log. Let's debug and see what this React object looks like. That is basically what we are doing in this session. So first of all, I showed you how you can start a React application by making sure that you have all the scripts that are available, whether you're using CDN or you're using them locally. Then we already had a functional component before, but right now we have used the React object to create a class component. Okay, so here now, for us to understand this React object, let's go and console this React object. So if I save this thing, go back to the browser, the live server would always restart your page if you make any changes and save it. So let's go back to our browser and open our console. Right click, inspect, open console, and this is our React object. This is the object we consoled. So if I expand it, you see it has a lot of properties and methods. We have these children, we have components. So this is the one I just used to create a component. I say react.component. So I used it to create a component. We are going to explain each and every one of them later on. So I just want to show you all that we have here. So we have these children, we have component, we have fragment, we have profiler, we have pure component. Pure component and component are mostly the same thing, but a little difference. So we have strict mode, suspense, we have art, we have clone element, we have create context, we have create context, we have create element. So I use this create element to create an element. I'm going to show you. Okay, so I have used this create element, I have used this component. There are a whole lot of, we are going to see all these things in action. That is what we are trying to discuss. Although we might not be discussing all of them, but I want you to understand that this is the React object. Okay, with this React object, you can create, this React object is what React uses to create their virtual DOM. Okay, now remember that React doesn't work with the real DOM. React works with its own DOM. React has its own DOM that we call virtual DOM. So that is what it used to manipulate it or update everything that we are doing. React doesn't work with the real DOM directly. It has its own virtual DOM that it works with. So anything you're manipulating or updating, anything that you're seeing here is a virtual DOM, and React is taking care of it. Okay, so let's go back to our slide and start taking this thing one by one. Okay, so the first React object is the core API. API is application programming interface. So you can see the APIs here. Okay, when we say API, if I go back to the browser, these are the APIs of this React. You see everything you see inside of this. Okay, these are the things. This is the application programming interface. The React made it available for us to use it. So these are the APIs. Okay. So React Object is the core API provided by the React library. So if you want to have access to the API of the React library, you have to go through the React Object. And it includes essential functions, components, and utilities to build your user interface. You see, with this React Object, it is enough for you to build any React application. So that is what we are trying to study, to understand what is inside of it, okay? So when you import React in a project, you gain access to this object. Now, because we are not using imports, all right, don't worry, in the one of the sessions where we'll be talking about how we can actually set up our application using NPM, okay, we are going to be using this import. But for now, we didn't use import. We use the React object directly because we have the files. We are pointing directly to the files. So the React object is available in that our react.js file. It's also available in the CDN that we are pointing to. So with that, we don't need to import it in this case. We are not importing it here. I will show you when we import it. There's another session we are going to talk about setting up React using NPM. So right here, we don't need to import it. Okay, in this HTML, inside this script, we can have access to this React. We don't need to import it. All right. So we don't need to import it here. We have direct access to it here. So now, let's take a look at the key properties and methods of this React object. The first one we'll take a look at is the React.createElement. All right. So, like I told you, React doesn't work with the real DOM. Okay, React works with virtual DOM. So if you want to create an element, all right, on the React virtual DOM, you use this React.createElement. So this is how you create an element. So if I go back to our code, let me show you. We used it here. We say React.createElement. And what element are we creating? We are creating the H1 element. That is why in our browser we have the H1 and this was a child. So this is what we use to create a React element. This React element is basically going to be, React is going to turn it into H1 element. Okay, so if you want to work with the React DOM, this is how you do it. You create an element in the React DOM, you use the create element. So Look at it. React.create element. So here we are creating H1 element. The first argument, okay, let's see if we can go to the browser and expand this create element function. Where is it again? So look at it here. So if we expand it, okay, it has three props. It has type, props, and children. Okay. I'm trying to get something that I want to show you. Okay. Okay. So if I go back to slide, okay, this element takes how many arguments? This is the first one, comma. This is the second one. The second one is an object. The first one is a string, all right? And this string is which element do you want to create? Do you want to create a H1 element? Do you want to create a span element? Do you want to create a div element? Do you want to create an anchor tag element? What element do you want to create? Okay, that is the first argument, but you have to put it in it's going to be a string, so either in single quote or in double quote. Then the second argument is an object. This object will contain all the attributes you want this element to have. If you don't know what attributes are, I believe you should go back to the HTML class, okay? So every element have attributes. Attributes come in name value pair, okay? So here we are saying class name equal to is title. Why are we not using the normal class? The attributes for the class here, this class name is actually the HTML attribute, the HTML class attribute. But we are not using class here because class is a keyword in JavaScript. Let me tell you something. We are still going to talk about it later on, but basically everything you do inside this React is a JavaScript function. At the end of the day, React is going to convert all this thing back to JavaScript function. Everything you're seeing here is JavaScript. So if you use class is a keyword in JavaScript. So if you want to make use of the class attribute, you don't use the normal class, you call it class name. All right. In React, we don't use class like that. If you want to talk about the class attribute, instead of instead of saying class, you're going to say class name. All right. So this object here will contain all the attributes. All right. All the attributes separated by commas. Okay. So here we just only have one class attribute, class name, and then the third attribute, the third argument is going to be what? Is going to be the children of this element. All right. We are using H1 tag here. Then the children could be other HTML elements. The children could be single text. Okay. So let me go on and show you. So I have here, I created this H1 element and I said, I'm giving it the class name React, and I have this child here. This is a simple test node. All right. This is a simple test node. So that is why we have what we have here. That's why we have this browser. So if I go on to inspect elements, all right, go to my body, you will see that this is our div, the div root. So if I expand it, you see, now this is the element we created. We said that the class name is React. Now, if you can see now, everything has been converted back to class because here, this is HTML. So that class name attribute that we had there was converted back to class. So, but don't worry, React will do it for you. So now this is the child. Hello React is the child of this class, of this H1 element. So if I go back to code and change it there, so if I say I don't want to have a test node, remember an HTML element could have test node as a child. It could have other HTML element. So let's assume I'm not okay. Okay, look at what I'm going to do. Yeah, it might be confusing a bit, but just pay attention. The first, we're creating an element, okay? So what I'm going to do here is that I want to have children. I want to show you children here. So I can just go back and say, okay, I'm creating a div instead of H1. I'm creating a div, and I'm going to, apart from class name, I also give it an ID. I'll give it an ID of what could I call it? I don't know. I just give it child. Okay, it doesn't matter. I just give it child. Then I have two attributes here now. In case I don't have any attributes, the value of this particular second argument will be null in case I don't have any attribute. But now, what will be the children of this my div? I don't want it to be a test node. So what I will do is that I'm going to create another element. So I will say React dot create element. Okay, the children of this element, I just want maybe I can now put in another, the child of this one is going to be H1. So I'm creating another element and I don't want any attributes. So I'll just say null. It's either I say null or an empty object. Okay. Then what will be the child of this element that I'm creating? I'll say hello React. So look at what I did here. All right. The first element I'm creating here is the div. All right. Although I'm not supposed to be explaining this thing right here. When we start talking about functional element, okay, let me explain. Let's continue with it. So I'm creating an element. You see, this React.create element will create a HTML element for you, and that we are creating a div here, and we are putting the attributes in this second argument as an object. And instead of us, the third argument is actually the children of this element you're creating. Now, it could be a test node, it could be other elements. So I choose not to go with a test node. I just went in to create another element. So in this element, I now say H1, and I'm creating the H1 element. I don't have any attributes. So, and the children of this H1 is a test node. So if I save this thing now, nothing changes on our browser, except that when we open this our body now, you will see this is our root element. But inside our root element, this is the first element we created. The first div element we created, and the child of this element was a H1 element. Okay, so you can see the attributes. The ID is child, the class is React. That class name was converted into class. Okay, so this is how you use the create element object. Okay, so now that's the create element object. I believe you understand it. Okay, you use the create element object to create a HTML element. Okay, so React is going to do all these things for you. All right. So we also have the React.component and React.pure component. So React.component is what is a class. All right, it is a class. React.pure component is also a class. So with the React.component, it is the base class for class component. So if you see here, I am creating okay, sorry for the interruption there. All right, so we have functional components and then class components. Okay, so here we are creating a class component. In this other side, we created a functional component, but that's not what we are talking about right now. So we are talking about this React.component. Remember, we are talking about the React object. So we have seen the React.create element function. Now we are not talking about the React.component. The React.component is actually a base class. So when you're creating a class component, you're going to inherit from the base class React.component. All right. So if I had imported this React, I would not say React.component. I would just say component straightforward. Okay. But right now we did not import it. So we are making use of this React object right away. So this my class component is extending, is inheriting. If you know what, if I believe you know classes in JavaScript. So I'm not going to talk about them here. So here, this class is inheriting from the main React.component class. Okay, so and you have, if you're creating a class component, it must extend the React.component, or it can also extend the React.pure component. There is a slight difference in both of them. When we start talking about React lifecycles, I would explain the difference between the pure component and the ordinary component, but both of them works well. Both of them work the same way. So even if I go on to the browser, no changes. Our code is still working. Okay, so here We can use the pure component or you can use the ordinary component. But the thing is that they are a base class for your class components, okay? Don't worry, when we get into class component, we are going to explain better. But just understand that the React.component and the React.pure component, they are used to create class components in React. Okay, so don't bother about the difference. When we start talking about, if I explain this thing here, you will not understand it. But when we talk about life cycles of a component, I'm going to mention it. Okay. All right. So you can see we are saying we are creating a component and we are extending. So this is the base class. If you understand classes in JavaScript, you know what I mean by base class. And if you don't understand, please, you have to go and take our JavaScript mastery class. Okay. All right. So now, this is the functional component. I'm not going to explain how to create functional components here. We are going to discuss it in a separate chapter, but the render method will do this. So this is basically, this class component is extending the React component. Okay. So the next thing we have here is the React fragment. Okay. The next thing we have here is React fragment. So we use React fragment to group multiple elements without adding an extra DOM node. So for me to explain this React fragment, I'm going to go back to using functional component. Okay. I will go back to using functional component. So I'm going to comment all this and I'm going to uncomment this one. All right. So basically, we are using JSS here in this functional component. Don't worry, we'll explain what JSS is as we go on, okay? So, but just understand what we are talking about is React objects. So for me to explain React.fragment, okay, if you see, if I try to do something like this, see, we are going to have an error. If I try to do something like this, another div here like this, okay, there will be an error. And I'm going to explain this error. You see, first of all, I'm having this red thing around here. There is an error. If you take your mouse over it, to say JSS expression must have one parent element. With JSS, your React component must have only one parent element. Here, we don't have any parent element. We just have the children. So if I go on and save this code now, our React application will break. You see, we don't have anything here. And if I go to the console, this is the error. We have an error here. So our React page has broken. All right. So if I go back to code, okay. So you have seen that our application has broken. Okay. Our application has broken. So what do we do here? We will have to use a React fragment to create a parent. Now, the error says JSS expression must have one parent element. So for us to create a parent element without adding extra HTML elements in the DOM, we will say React.fragment. Okay? We'll say React.fragment. Okay, it has to be like this. React.fragment. Okay, we are going to wrap. Okay, we are going to wrap everything inside of this React.fragment. So we will have another one here, React.fragment. All right, so you can see now there's no error again. Now, the thing is this, we had two separate elements and there was no parent element. So one thing with React is this, every element, every of your component must have one parent element. All right, you cannot come and have two elements like this without a parent element. So for you to have a parent element without adding, we could actually put div inside here. We could actually say div here. We could actually do div. But when you use div to create the parent element, you're adding extra element to the DOM. So if you don't want to add extra element to the DOM, you can just use the React.fragment like this. And when we go back to our browser, everything works. Everything should be working fine. Do we have any error? App component is not defined. Oh, sorry. We are no longer using the app component. So I should take, I'm not bringing the right, so we are using this functional component app here. So when we go back to the browser, everything works fine. Okay. So, and if I go back, if you don't want to use the React fragment, the shortcut is instead of, if I take everything out like this and just use angle brackets like this is a shortcut for the React fragment. If you don't want to use React.fragment, you can actually use this shortcut like this. So if I see save it, everything works fine. Everything works fine. An error, there's an error. Let's go back and see what happened. What happened? What happened? There's no error here. Okay. What happened? What happened? What happened? Oh, okay. I think there is an error in my code. What's happening? Hmm. This is my React fragment. Wow. Okay. It seems like there is a space here or something. Okay. Is my fragment not correct? Yes, now this is how to create fragment now. Just give me a minute. Okay, this is how to create fragment now. Okay, so let me go back. This is how to create fragment, the shortcut for fragment. But that's where I'm getting the error. Am I not, are you still using Babel now? Okay, we are still using Babel. So what is happening? No, that's not. Okay, so I don't know. Let me take this thing back to the React fragment, React.fragment. I don't have strength to debug this whole thing. It will take us time. So I don't want to spend time debugging. So in order not to waste time, let's go back to having the React fragment that was working before. So if I save this thing now, go to the browser, everything is cool now. Okay. All right. So that is the React fragment. But the shortcut is this angle bracket like this. Okay. That's it. Okay. Let me try one more time and debug. Okay. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yes. There's no error here, but we come here, we are having issues. What is happening? Okay. All right. You can just go with using the React fragment, but if you can put a div here, it will still work. But the thing is that you're going to have extra div. You're going to have extra div, which might not be good. So if I open the element now, you're seeing we are going to be having extra div. You see, this is the extra div that we just added. These are the children. So, but if you use React fragment, that div will not be there. If you use React fragment, that div will not be there. Okay. So if I go back and say React fragment, I don't know why the other shortcut is not working here. I don't know, but it's okay. I'm not going to React.fragment. I believe somehow my code is breaking somewhere. So, but I don't want to, I don't want to spend so much time trying to debug it. React.fragment. One thing with me is that I write my code very raw. I don't prepare them on, beforehand to show you. No, this is real programming. This is real development. All right, this is how you write code. You have errors, you fix them. Okay. So now, when I do React fragment, I'm no longer using the div for the parent element. If I go back to the browser, all right, if I open the body now, look at it. This is the root div. You can see here we no longer have the other div that was closing this other one. Okay, so if you want to use a parent element without adding extra element to the DOM, use the React fragment. Okay, all right. So let's run. Let's run. We also have the React.clone element. So it creates a copy of a React element with a new props. So if you already have a React element, that this is a valid React element. This is called JSS. Don't worry, we'll talk about JSS later on. So this is a valid React element. So if I want to clone this element and then add new properties, new props, or basically props are attributes. If I want to add more attributes to this element, I will use the React.clone element. All right. Then I'm going to create it as if I'm creating a new element. You understand? So I'll put in the element I want to create, of course, and then I'll put in the props like this. All right. So basically, I don't think I'm going to show you any code here, but just to understand, this is normal, common JavaScript. We have this React JSS. We have this JSS creating an element like this. So this is a valid element, and then we are cloning it. So we want to add more prop. Now, in case you have an element, a component, or whatever it is, and you want to add extra properties, you want to add more props to that element, you use the React clone element. So the first argument is the element you're cloning, and the second argument is an object of attributes that you want to give it, or the props, okay? So we also have the React.isValid element. This checks if a value is a valid React element. So we have this element, which is a JSS. This is a JSS. And if we say React.isValid element, it will say true because it's a valid element. But if we go on and say React.isValid element, this is a text. This is just a string. So it's not a valid element. It's not a valid React element, so it is false. So in case, I don't think, I've not used this before, okay? So, but if you want to check for validity of your elements, you can use the React.isValid element, okay? So we also have another one, React.children, okay? Now, this is used for working with children inside components. Let me show you how children components work. If I go back to our code, okay, I think I would, okay, let me still leave the real, let me still leave this. So, okay, okay, so let me just create a very simple, let me create a very simple component, okay? So I'm going to start from, I'm going to do it here. Okay, I will just create a functional element, a functional component, and I'll still call it app. Okay, and this is it. And I'm just returning a div. I'm just returning a div that is empty. But now I'm going to have children here. So this children comes in as a React prop, as a component prop. Don't worry, we'll talk about component props later on. But this is how we destructure. This is what I'm doing here is JavaScript and object destructuring because the props comes in as children. Or what I can do is this. It's either I destructure it like this or I use the props. Okay? All right. So when I use the props, right, look at what I'm going to do. Um, I'm going to say console.log props. I'm going to say console.log props. Okay. And when I now call, this is a normal component. Okay. But if a component that has children, this is how we write it, like this. Okay. This is a component that has children. The other one we were using was basically it was a normal component. But this one now is a component that have children. So I can actually put in other things in here. I can say H1. Okay, so these are the children of this guy now. Don't worry, you get to understand better when we do, okay, hello React. All right, so this is our component, very simple thing. It is just returning a div, okay? And here we are passing in a child. Before we were doing, this is how we were doing it before. We are saying when we call that app, we did it like this. That's how we did it. Okay, so this is just a self-closing component. But when a component has, because components can have children, when they have children, you do it this way. You create the opening tag and the closing tag like this, then pass in the elements inside of it like this. So if I save this thing now, we are going to have hello React. Oops. Okay, sorry. There's an error. Sorry. Look at what I'm going to do. I wasn't inside here. Oh, sorry about that. Inside here, I'm going to actually pass in the props like this. Oh, props dot children. Okay. Okay. So when I do this, the children are actually going to, so you can see it's worked now. So let me go and explain the code. Okay. This might be a little too much for you now, but don't worry, as we go on, you're going to understand better. So now I passed in these props. Okay, if I go back, let me go back to the browser, open the console. I'm consoling the, you see, we have children here. So we have props dot children. So this is, the children are this H1 that we created. Okay, so now this is, I believe you understand what, sorry, you don't have to understand what props are right now, okay? But in case a component has children, this is how you get them. Okay, so if you want to get them from React, you're going to say, I can say React.children, okay? Let me say console.log, and I will say React.children. If I console.log React.children, this is how you can have access to the children of React from here. Okay. But basically, when we talk about components and props and children, we're going to explain better on. But right now, I just want to show you this React.children property that we have here. So if I go on to the browser, you can see this React.children object, it has a count property, it has the for each, it has the map, it has the only, it has the to array. All right. So this is how you can actually get access. Now, if you want to get the count of the children, how many children does this component has? You use the count method. If you want to loop through each and every one of them, you use the map or the for each. Okay. So now, if I go back, I can just say react.component.count. This is going to give us the number of children that this particular React component has. So if I go back to the browser, you see, it's actually a function actually, sorry. So I have to call it as a function. It is not a property. I have to call it as a function. So if I go back to the browser, you see, it gave us 0. It has 0 child. Okay. But basically, we have more than one child there. We have more than one child here. Okay. So if I say react.map, I can use the map function here. It will take the props.children as an argument. Then I can just say the callback function will be just return. I hope you understand what I am writing here. I'll just say return the child. Okay. So if I run this code now and go back to the browser, you see we have the child returned as an array. Okay. So I believe why we didn't get the other guy was the syntax. We got the syntax wrong. So you can just go on and take a more look at this. So if I say count, I think this count might be taking something like this. So let me see. Because that count didn't give us the right thing the other time. So let's see. Okay, yeah, we now got it right. Yeah, I think we got the syntax wrong. Okay, so now the thing is this. The count will take in the children props. Okay, so you can walk around with this. Okay, so let's take more look at the props.children. So the react.children. So this is how you write you might not understand children and profs right now because we have not taught you that. Okay, but don't worry. I might still revisit this React.children later on when we start talking about children in React component. Okay, but just understand that there is something called React. There is a React.children object, and it has several methods: the count, the map, the for each. Okay, you can actually go and learn more about them. Okay, but basically you might not be using them hardly, but just understand that there is something like this. Okay, so we also have the forward ref. This forward ref, this is the only thing I'm going to explain here. Refs, when we use ref, remember that React does not use the real DOM. React works with anything you're doing in your React, you're working with the virtual DOM, not the real DOM. So with the real DOM, if you want to have access to the real DOM, you use what we call refs. Okay, now don't worry, we are still going to explain refs later on, but just get this explanation. React works with the virtual DOM. So anything you're doing inside your code, you're working with the virtual DOM, not with the real DOM. But if you want to have access to the real DOM, you use something we call refs. But refs is something we are still going to teach later on. Now, if I want to pass refs to child components, I will use forward ref. You might not understand what is happening here, but all I want you to understand here is this. Whenever you want to work with the real DOM in your code, you'll be working with the virtual DOM. That's what React provides to you. But if you want to work with the real DOM, you use refs. Okay, and if you're ever working with, you want to pass refs to child components, that's where you use forward refs. Just have it like that for now. Okay, now we have another one, React.lazy and React.suspense. So if you want to lazily load your React components, all right, we'll talk about that later on. If you want to lazily load your React documents, components, you will use this React.lazy. So used for code splitting and lazy loading components, this would improve performance of your application. Okay, so we use the React.lazy function and React.suspense. Okay, so this is where we use them. Just know that these things exist. React.lazy and React.suspense is used for performance reasons. If you want your application to be more performant, you actually load components lazily. Okay, these components will be loaded when they are needed. They will not just be loaded into the DOM even when they are not needed. So that is what you can understand for now. React.memo is also for performance reasons, okay? You use it to memorize. I don't know, I found this thing difficult to pronounce. Memoization. Use it for memoization, okay? So it is actually, we're going to explain all these things later. We're going to explain memoization later on. So there's this memo function inside of this React object, okay? So we also have the use state and the use effect. So these are hooks. We'll talk about hooks later on. So if you want to have access to the React hooks, we have the React.useState, React.useEffect, React.useRef, React.useMemo, okay, and so on and so forth. Okay, so these are hooks. So these are the things you can find in your React objects. Okay, I hope this session didn't confuse you. Okay, but these are the things you can find in your React object. It's actually essential. Okay, you get to understand more things. Okay, if you want to take more control. So the React object is the foundation of the React library, and it includes the component creation. It provides you with what you use to create components. It provides you with what you use to optimize performance. It provides you with what you use to handle your children of components. It provides you with code splitting, React Lazy, and React Suspense. Hooks also are also available. So thank you very much. All right. If you have any confusion, if you have any question, please reach out to me. Reach out to us so that we can clear your confusions. Thank you very much and have a great day.